Welcome to Sacred Earth Journey Roundtable, where we travel the world unfiltered, where strangers become tribe, and global peace begins at kitchen tables. Welcome to Sacred Earth Journey Roundtable. I'm Anna Saladino, your host or hostess, and cultural curiosity, cultural stewardship, cultural relationship is all very important to human interaction. Every single one of us comes from a variety of backgrounds. We all have different ethnical backgrounds. We have different religious backgrounds. I mean, even within sector to sector, within one neighborhood to another neighborhood, there are so many varying degrees of experiences and perspectives. In my personal journeys, I have discovered that much of what I hear and have been taught, either through the educational systems, through echo chambers and silos, through social media, and through news media, many times are not very accurate. And so this is what birthed the initiative of Sacred Earth Journey, where we travel the world unfiltered, strangers become tribe, and global peace begins at kitchen tables. It may sound lofty, but I believe from my personal experience that this is actually attainable. And today I have such an exciting guest. His name is Jared Sorber, and he founded Cultural Curiosity. So without further ado, Jared, if you would please just go ahead and introduce yourself briefly and the ecosystem behind Cultural Curiosity, and then we will jump right into the conversation. Real quick, for those who are joining us, Sacred Earth Journey Roundtable is not scripted. It is very organic and fluid, and that's intentional. So, Jared, go ahead and introduce yourself and Cultural Curiosity.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's good to be with you. I started Cultural Curiosity a little over a year ago, and I just want to help people be effective across cultures. I think we're better together, whether it's in our organizations, as a community, or just, as we become friends around the world, as you're seeking to do. And so I think humbling ourselves to ask questions is a great way to build relationship and really understand one another and build bridges across cultures.
So, Jared, how did you get to this point, right? Because, looking at you and listening to you, if we were going to assume, which we very rarely should ever do, but if we were going to assume, we've never met you before, you're probably from the United States of America. You probably come from a European-ish background. How did you come to the place to where cultural curiosity and stewardship was important to you? Was there some defining moment, like an aha moment that said, wait a second, maybe I didn't fully understand things? When did this happen and how?
Yeah, I think there's several steps along the journey that kind of brought me to this point. I grew up in upstate New York, where a lot of people looked like me in a small city. Had an opportunity to do an internship in the Capital District of New York in a city similar to mine, but the diversity of it was very different. Much more African American neighborhood. I did the internship at a city mission, so I was spending a lot of time with a homeless population. So we had, racial differences, we had economic differences, and yet, they didn't live that far from me, and it was a completely different experience of life. And so my eyes were opened through that. And the following summer, as I was concluding college, I did another internship in the Baltimore, Washington area with a multicultural church that has 60 different nations represented within the body of the church. And so I've been there ever since, 27 years later, and have learned from a tremendous mentor that's my pastor here as he builds bridges across divides. And so that's built my heart and built my skills, I think, in bridge building across cultures as well.
It's fascinating you use that word and that phrase, that you had to develop skills for intercultural relationship. This is something that I'm all too familiar with, right? Nuances, etiquette, how you move, the pace at which you move. are all very unique to various cultures. This is absolutely true. You don't necessarily know this if you've been maybe restricted to a certain silo or or environment. And you mentioned in the neighborhood that you grew up in, was there ever a preconceived idea or perception that you had about, I think you said, the African community, that when you started interacting with them, that you were like, wow, I was way off?
Yeah, I don't specifically remember like one thing. I do remember, when I went to do the internship in the Capital District of New York, that neighborhood was just very different than mine. Uh, Really, it was a lot of different areas I saw. I saw educational differences. The schools weren't in the shape that my schools were in. We were there during the summer. We take kids to feeding programs that were in the youth part of the city mission, and so we take them to schools. And I just noticed the schools aren't quite as well kept as the schools I were in. We'd walk through the neighborhoods, and there weren't the resources in the neighborhoods that maybe I had in my neighborhood. There was a prison in the neighborhood, and I thought that doesn't exist in my neighborhood. And I just began to see this different system that was set up there that I had not experienced, that essentially moved people not ever out of their neighborhood, but from the school systems to a lack of education, and many to prison, unfortunately. And so it just
Wow.
very stark difference than my neighborhood.
I have emotional things that are transpiring within me hearing you describe this. What were your emotional experiences, and like what were you feeling on the inside when you encountered these differences?
Yeah, always wondered why. Like what's beneath this, and now I've become a researcher, and I'm examining like the whys behind some of these things. But I lived with an African American family there, and so I had a mentor that I could ask questions and learn about his upbringing. And um, me as an outsider, living in this community for 8 or 9 weeks or whatever it was, felt exhausted by the daily life. A funeral or two a week, it seemed we were going to. The challenges of food for the students we were working with, and stable home environments and things like that. And I thought, if it's exhausting to me, and I'm a visitor here for a few weeks, it's got to be something else to live with a different reality day after day after day, and feeling like you don't have an ability to change that, and you don't have really a say into how society is treating you.
Jared, remind us, you're describing a city here in the United States. You're not talking about a third world country. What area
Yeah.
was this in again, just for the
Yeah,
viewers?
it's in Schenectady, Albany area of New York, the Capital District. The zip code we were working in is even to the day continues to be one of the highest violent crime zip codes in New York State. And so, yeah, just systemic problems that in my growing up, we kind of have our own household, our own neighborhood normals, and we think, what, maybe life is like this for everyone in the U.S. And certainly,
Wow.
within my region, it wasn't that far away from where I grew up. But the reality was very different, and probably even in the city I grew up in, there were areas that were like that and very different than the
Yeah.
reality of my growing up.
This is so eye-opening. So how did you so many thoughts. We, as humans, we often make so many assumptions that could not be further from the truth.
Mhm.
I'm thinking right now, some of the stereotypes that I have personally heard about uh, the African American community. They're angry. I just violence. gang activity. These are the things that I grew up hearing about. But when I hear you describing this particular community, then my mind goes to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and to other places. Because in a sense, the community you're describing seems by necessity that it carries on in more of a tribal manner for preservation and protection and security, which means the way things are done are going to be very different than in a society where tribalism is not required for self-preservation, safety, and security. Many people living in the United States of America are not going to fully comprehend that. And if you are listening or watching and you're not understanding what I'm saying, it's a very communal mindset, very protective for good reason. And so when I go back to the things that I used to hear growing up about they're angry, the violence, and all the things, can you just touch on that? And from your perspective, having spent time in that particular community, did you maybe discover why? And did you maybe begin to have some empathy as to why these perceptions are out there? I'm not sure if I'm articulating that clearly.
Yeah. I think, as I reflect on why, and you get to know people and understand people, you see that there's reasons that we have, we as the majority culture in the United States, as a white person and as a white man, why there might be stereotypes when you keep a distance. When you're not involved and you don't really know people, you kind of develop this single story. And I found with a multiplicity of stories, you get different angles on what's really going on within a community, within a culture. And you begin to learn, the history of a people, and that different cultures function differently. I think we often look at outside behaviors and we think, oh, why would anyone act like that? And we're comparing it to our normal, right? It's different than our normal. So we say we label it, we say it's weird, we say it's different. But underneath the behaviors are a belief system and values and a worldview. And foundationally, different cultures have different worldviews. So it means they believe different things and have different values, which means the behaviors are different. And those are shaped by so many different things within our family. It's shaped by our parents and our household and how that functions within our community. It's shaped by the resources that we have access to, the freedom we have to make choices and decisions, and so many different things built into that. And so it really shapes you. And foundationally, the culture is different than the behaviors are going to be different. And so as I think about being curious, asking questions without passing judgment, like, why is that the case? How can I better understand that? And we've had a history in the United States of mistreatment of people of color that have developed and led to certain things that then we ask why do we do that? Maybe we don't like that. We create stereotypes and cast judgment. And yet there's reasons behind that as you get to know people and understand people, we can build relationships. We can get to know one another better and understand those reasons and work together.
Absolutely. In spending time within that community, did you discover in your curiosity and in your questions, what did you gain as far as what are the top 2 or 3 most important things to the people within that community?
Yeah, there's definitely a familial care for one another value that I don't want to say didn't exist in my community, but certainly didn't exist with that many people within my community. was a level of neighbors knowing neighbors and caring for one another's kids and looking out for each other. So I saw that as a great value that I could learn from, I could grow from, I could implement, I could seek to be that for someone else, right? A caring community member, looking and raising someone in the community. So I think that perspective stood out to me. And, there's more of a collective thinking. We're a part of the same. We need to look out for one another. We need to be a resource for one another. We need that support for one another. So I think that's the kind of the thing that stood out to me as one of the values that I learned from and took away from that community.
That's so rich. I remember just a few days ago, I was having a conversation with an imam at a local mosque that is under a lot of scrutiny by I want to be careful how I word and frame things, but by a particular group or community. They're really almost under assault in some ways. And this particular group or community, for some reason, has put them on the radar, and they are there's just this constant, they show up, they are trying to intimidate and portray them in one way and all the things. And one of the things out of that was brought to the surface was how tight-knit the Muslim community is in this particular area, in this particular city, in Dallas-Fort Worth. Mm-hmm. And it was acknowledged by the group who's been trying to kind of attack them, not physically, but just disrupt things. And that the disruptive group noticed, like, well, they have these security layers and and they're, but when you just mentioned what you did about this African-American community, it's the same thing. And I had this conversation with the imam. Of course, you develop these protective measures, one, because you need to, and two, because you want to protect and preserve your community. You want to keep your community safe. And when you have outside sources that feel threatening, whether that perception is reality or not, then you naturally develop these communal protective layers. This is true of almost every other region in the world. But then you mentioned in your community that you are familiar with that maybe that level wasn't quite there as much. I think this is a fascinating point. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think a majority culture doesn't need that same level as a minority culture. When you're a smaller group, within the majority, you're trying to adjust to what the majority culture is. And I think the easy thought from the majority culture is why can't they just assimilate to how we were? But what I've learned is there's really beauty in diversity, and there's great value that comes from different perspectives and different cultural backgrounds. And so I would then turn to the majority culture and say, what are you doing, to be welcoming and to learn from different perspectives and include different perspectives in. And so I think that's a great learning, is that when you're looking at a minority culture, of course they're tighter knit. They're a smaller group trying to function within a larger culture that is not their own, and they're probably better at doing that. My mentor that I mentioned before, Dr. David Anderson, would often say it's like minorities in this country have a double major. They're majoring in their own culture, they know that well, but they also have to major in the majority culture. And so they're actually maybe a little bit better at naturally seeing the two cultures. As a majority person, I don't have to understand their culture at all. I can function in my own world with people like me and say, why aren't they more like us? And just move along. It's not a requirement for me. And so as I encourage people to get curious, I encourage them to, double major. Like, why don't we seek to understand other cultures and how other cultures function as well?
And that's a really good question. I think we're going to pause for just a moment and take a quick break. All right, we are back from our short break. Jared, do you remember what we were talking about just a few minutes ago with regard to being a part of the majority and then trying to understand better about just the curiosity and asking the questions? I think that was your question, is why from the majority, or how can we become better at asking questions and being more curious rather than assumptive?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's easy for the majority culture to, label their way of doing things, right? That's what culture is kind of your way of doing things as the normal. And once again, you don't have to step outside of that. But I think as we get to know one another better from other cultures, you learn greater value in that. So I think one thing is understand there's greater value in togetherness of different cultures than there is of any one culture. And I think it's just kind of a natural like path of least resistance, right? Like I have to do extra work to understand another culture, and so it might hinder people from wanting to do that. But once again, if you see the value in it, then you might start making choices to spend time with someone of a different culture, build relationships. I love, you're setting up a table, right? And sharing meal is some of what you talk about. And as you do that, you really get to know people and understand different perspectives.
This is so true. I'm wondering, again, so many thoughts. So why is it so challenging to be curious about other cultures? I also believe that there's some of it might be laziness.
Mhm.
I think some of it might also be fear of the unknown, fear of the things we've heard and we've been told that we've just come to believe without actually having real experiences. That's the first thought. The second thought, I love that you mentioned what we're doing here with the round table. And one of the richest things that I learned in my overseas experiences, and I just had this conversation with someone else this morning, building trust in other parts of the world takes a lot longer and it moves a lot more slowly. You cannot arrive in a region outside of the United States with an itinerary and an agenda and a Western mindset of how to do or fix things and expect it to go as planned. This will not happen. Absolutely, it will not happen. You will eventually figure out you need to rip up that itinerary and you need to accommodate and become accustomed to drinking a lot of tea, sitting down and having a lot of meals. Your meetings and your work is most likely going to take place when you least expect it and unplanned. It will take place in rides in the tuk-tuk or in a vehicle going to the souk. It will take place around tables of food and drinking tea. And there's something beautiful that I learned in that and that I've discovered is in many parts of the world, relationships, trust is centered, it's relationally based. In America, and I love America, so before somebody tries to go and take this and start chopping it up and make something that it's not, I absolutely love America, and I feel fortunate and blessed to be living in America and to be a citizen of the United States of America. We do have a lot of growing to do and a lot of learning to do. And I think this is where the cultural curiosity comes in because we can benefit from these exchanges with other cultures. In America, it seems that we have become more transactional.
Mhm.
And you lose a lot of trust with other communities and cultures when you come in transactionally as opposed to relationally.
Yeah.
So, Jared, I would love to hear your thoughts on these topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust that you mentioned is so important. And what keeps us from, entering those relationships, you mentioned fear. And so I always teach people there's kind of two ways that you can enter into another culture, whether it's here, whether it's around the world. You can enter with fear, with suspicion, with hesitancy. And what happens when you enter another culture with that? I think when you're looking for things to be afraid of, I think you tend to find confirmation of yes. If you're suspicious of something, you might find confirmation of that. But if you enter in a different culture another way, with openness, acceptance, and trust, and I often get pushback like, but I don't know them. How can I? And you can enter in assuming trust. And I've never been burned that way. I think there's a fear, right? Like, how is this going to go? But when you go in, just, I don't have an agenda. Like you said, there's not this meeting schedule that I have to get through and get done. I'm just open. Like, let's see what's going to happen. I'm accepting of teach me your culture. What are your foods? What are, I'm very accepting of whatever experience you want to lead me into. And you know what? I'm going to choose to trust you from the beginning. And then we're going to build the trust from there. It's a completely different experience than entering, with fear, suspicion, and hesitancy.
Absolutely. And when you enter in that way, that inadvertently oftentimes creates the same thing on the other side.
Yeah, you receive the same thing back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like when you enter into a community, like is happening in Plano, Texas, you enter into a community with fear and suspicion and accusation. Well, you're also going to be met with fear. and it's like, it's a two-way street. So building trust, it takes time and it takes humility. And I love what you said about how going in with curiosity and going in to learn. We can learn so much from each other. I would say probably one of the greatest things that my immersive travels have taught me is how important trust is, how long it takes to build that trust. But at the same time, conversely, like you said, we can actually build trust faster if we go slower. What do I mean by that? Instead of when you meet someone straight away and you immediately start going into what you need or how you believe something should be fixed, slow down and take time to honor the person and the people in front of you. You also said something else about accepting. I want to be really clear about something another thing I've learned. I can be accepting of someone who is very different from me without agreeing with them or their perspective. This has occurred in the humanitarian crisis response work that I've done. I could open a can of worms here, but I'm going to just go ahead and share it anyway. Again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the community and how tribal communities work, and the crisis response work that we did in Afghanistan. We had to collaborate and negotiate with certain groups and people. And we had to build trust with people in certain organizations in order to make it safely through checkpoints. Do I agree with their ideologies? Do I agree with some of the egregious things that they are carrying out against the Afghan people? Absolutely not. But I also recognized, and I learned a really interesting and key point. Many of the men who were in these non-state actor organizations, and if I need to spell it out for you, terrorist regimes, many of the men and boys who were in these organizations are in these organizations to protect their family. If the family has someone in this organization, that organization won't touch the family. Yeah. Many of those men actually don't agree with the ideologies of said organization. They're there to protect their family. Who would not want to protect their own family? And so again, it's just these dynamics that we don't even consider. If we were in that position, if we were in that situation, right? How would we act? What would we do? And so when you talk about accepting someone who comes from a vastly different background or culture, I think this is beautifully rich. How, Jared, do you encourage or educate people who maybe are just beginning in cultural curiosity to maneuver in that aspect?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I do is encourage them to expand their different category. And so I think we encounter things and we tend to categorize them. It's our brain is created that way. They've done a lot of research, and oftentimes how we categorize things that are different is kind of into right or wrong. And depending on our personality and on our culture, we might have a very clear right and wrong. We have something that helps us really define it, and this is right and this is wrong. And some people, are a little bit more free flowing with that. But I think you're right. There's this category where we don't have to agree, but we can enter into it, and it's that different or other category in the middle. And a simple illustration of that is I took a team to South Africa years ago, and there was a person on the team that kept saying, "Why are they driving on the wrong side of the road?" I mean, from a North American perspective, we drive on the right side of the road. In South Africa, they drive on the left side of the road. So I had to repeat a few times. It's not right or wrong side of the road. It's right or left side of the road.
There you go.
Different, right? It's a different side of the road. It's not a wrong side of the road. And so I think we can do that with a lot of different things. There's so many different behaviors that, if we don't place judgment on them immediately, suspend judgment, place them in another category, and just understand, we're going to get a different perspective on it. We're gonna learn what that's about, why that exists. Like you were sharing, the backstory for why people might make decisions that they make. But when you cast judgment immediately, even if it's right, even if you're like, oh, I like that you do miss out on some of the nuance behind that and understanding that it's beyond it.
That's so true. So I have another question for you. You're a pastor. And in our previous conversation, you talked about how you have a vast variety of people who show up to your services. Mm-hmm. And they're not all, you're a Christian pastor, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think you mentioned that there are non-Christians who show up to your services. Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah, there are, every week there's people that come to our church, that are just checking it out. They come as friends of somebody, and then we have different events at the church throughout the week. And so people, that you would never expect to step in the doors of the church might come in to be a part of an event, whether that or get food or other resources that the church provides. Yeah.
Like, who's showing up that maybe doesn't fit into that Christian category?
Yeah, so we've built relationships with some Afghan refugees in our community, and I've met with other, missions pastors, and they say, oh, we could never do programs at our church because they would never come into our church, and I kind of look at them funny. I'm like, well, we actually did a Christmas event and invited our Afghan refugee friends, and they came and the kids played the game. Like, there's just kind of, you make assumptions and you maybe leave people out, but if you build relationships and they're teaching me about what they believe, and we're teaching them about what we believe. They know our church is a multicultural place. They see the United States as a multicultural place. So to them, it seems like kind of the natural thing, like, oh, people here do Christmas. Like, I want to learn about it. So they come to learn. And so rather than making assumptions about what people are, and we, choosing who's going to come and who's not going to come, kind of offer and open the doors to anyone and everyone, and see who's willing to come as we build relationships with people. And I think you'd be surprised at who might show up.
That's beautiful. I love that you are setting the table for, just such a welcoming table to invite so many different people in. I remember being in the airports in Qatar and in Dubai, and just the Christmas decorations. I was so confused. I was like, what is going on? But and then even like my Afghan friends here in the States, or even when I was in Egypt and in Turkey, and they would come, they asked if they could come to church, and
Mhm.
and they wanted to come to the prayer meetings and the Bible studies. And I'm like,
Yeah.
the first question was, would I be welcome? Would it be safe for me to come? I'm like, yes, come on, absolutely. And so I think there, and then, I have a circle of girlfriends. I'm the only Christian. And then there's an American, she's also Italian, who converted to Islam. And then I have three other Islamic female friends, one from Sudan, one is from Egypt, and then the other one is from Iraq. We are so tight. We pray together. We do life together, and it's so beautiful. One of them, she actually will go light a candle at the Catholic Church sometimes when she's just feeling heavy about something. And she's so cute because, when we're hanging out, she'll just every now and then she'll be like, "Hallelujah!" And it's just these assumptions. But so in what you're doing in your community at your church, have you received any kind of flashback or any kind of pushback from anyone in the community?
There has been time. We're in a very multicultural community here. Columbia, Maryland is a planned community, and the planner 60, 70 years ago envisioned a diverse place where people met one another. And so there is a bit of a bubble here where people are in this community because they like diversity and they want to experience diversity. There's mixed income housing, all mixed in with one another. But still, even being in a place like this, there's racial incidents that occur in the community. And then as faith comes into it, we're often turned to be like, what's the faith perspective on that? And it can get you in trouble, at least in certain people's view, right? If you don't say the right thing every time. And it's funny enough, a couple times that jumped to the top of my mind when you asked that question were when we stood up to be bridge builders. Because sometimes when you stand in the middle trying to get people together, you get it from both sides. And so there's several times where there's been a victim and there's been a perpetrator, and we're trying to bring the two sides together. And the backlash from the community is, why would you ever extend any grace to the perpetuator of something like this? And
Right.
the bigger picture we see is there can be reconciliation in that.
Yeah.
And so as we seek that out, sometimes you get it from both sides. And I think that can be the
that's such a good point. And I love that you just framed it that way. There can be reconciliation. This is so important. And I think that I'm just going to have you on again for sure, because there are just so many rich conversations that we can have. There can be reconciliation. We have to be willing. And I shared an article and a post on my personal Facebook page the other day. At the end of everything, you're human, I'm human, we are all human. We are all part of the human race. And that, I think, is what is most important. We are all created beings by the same creator, I believe. What is his name? What is its name? Whatever, right? We are all created into one species. And we will all leave this earth at some point with nothing. And so I think, ending on what you just said, there can be reconciliation. Can you think of maybe 2 or 3 key important aspects of how we can, as human beings, how can we begin to foster reconciliation within broken communities?
Yeah, I think entering with grace for everyone involved, extending favor, entering with trust. I think there's some of those positive things that you need to enter in with humbly yourself. And so I would say seek to be humble, seek to extend grace and trust, and then build from there. Don't start from zero or negative and then try to build trust. Be the one that reaches out, the one that extends trust, the one that's willing to build that relationship. Suspending judgment, as we talked about earlier. I think all those position you in a place where you can ask questions, get to know someone, and then through relationship, I think, comes reconciliation. You can't do that from a distance, and so you need to enter in through relationship.
Wow, those are really healthy, strong points. I know that this is something I aim to do, and I am striving to create a community and a space to make that possible. You're doing this, and I think it's going to just take collaboration and more conversations. Something that I am hoping to do is to create community roundtables, events, and maybe this is something we can talk about offline, where we can actually create opportunity to intentionally come and sit with people from various backgrounds and just begin to build relationship. And I think with these points that you just raised, and then doing things like this, I think that, in the beginning, I opened with global peace begins at kitchen tables. And I said, this is a lofty idea. It's a lofty idea until we realize that as individuals, we have so much power to foster an environment of reconciliation.
Yeah.
So, Jared, do you have any final thoughts you want to share for this episode? I definitely want to have you back on and want to collaborate with you more in the future. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, just encourage people to hold loosely to their own culture, look at their own culture, be curious about who you are, and curious about who others are as well. I think, if you don't understand yourself and your own culture, it's hard to see how you fit with other cultures.
Wow. And now maybe you just created a third episode, because, this is another great point. I've learned so much about myself in this immersive travel in other parts of the world. And I also learned that I don't know a lot about myself, So, and that put me on this path of discovering more about who am I in this tapestry that I'm woven together by? What is my culture? And so it has created more curiosity for my own culture and family background. But I think that's absolutely critical for us to move forward, is we do have to know something about ourselves. But you have been such a wonderful person to sit down with, and absolutely, I look forward to more collaboration. If someone wants to learn more about cultural curiosity, or maybe they're interested in supporting or anything like this, can you just very quickly share how that can happen?
Yeah, culturalcuriosity.net is the website, and you can also find us at Cultural Curiosity on Instagram and Facebook, and you can contact me through there, as well as on LinkedIn. There's at Cultural Curiosity as well. And so try to put content out there, but also stay connected with people. So I'd love to work together and just connect with others who are like-minded, like yourself. So thank you so much for all you do and for hosting this podcast.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Jared, definitely will hang out with you again. And I look forward to future collaborations. You have been amazing. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Everybody, thank you so much. If you tuned in, thank you for listening and watching. I hate to say it, but please like and subscribe, whatever. If you enjoyed the content, we definitely invite you to join us at www.sacredearthjourney.com, as well as culturalcuriosity.net. We also are on YouTube and on Facebook. We have a roundtable section on the website where articles are put out. There are 2 journals. There's a Sacred Space journal for individual transformation for cultural stewardship. And then there's the Sacred Earth Journey Roundtable Journal that is meant for groups, and that is to basically facilitate conversation to help small groups just become more culturally aware and intelligent. And there is a book that will be coming out very soon called Daughter of Many Tribes. And it's really more about my personal journey about how Sacred Earth Journey came to be about. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Jared. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you so much for joining us. Take what you heard, question it, sit with it, and bring it to your own table, because this is where cultural stewardship begins.